welcome back. We are continuing today on page 178, the 12th chapter. Now let's try something. We're going to definitely try to really come into it right away. We always contemplate how much to bring in from the last class, how much time to take from the present class to bring in the information of the last class in order to see the connecting points over here between the two and how it fits into the entire previous classes, or namely the chapter, and even how it fits into the sequence of the entire Shar Yichud V'Emunah. Now, Shar Yichud V'Emunah is this segment of the 12 chapters, which Alter Rebbe brings us into a gate of oneness and faith. We mentioned many times. It's always good to mention for the newcomers. It's not only another explanation of the idea of Yichud, oneness, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, or faith for that matter, but Alter Rebbe brings us really into this gate in a way that we see the idea of oneness from the perspective of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for real. Naturally, like the Rambam writes, Kifi Kayach Ha'adam, in the end of the famous, the end of the halachas of the entire Rambam, is magnum opus Mishnah Torah, always Kifi Kayach Ha'adam, but it's definitely an insight of the way things are behind the veil. And as we mentioned, it's not a matter about Alter Rebbe sharing with us information about this, or an explanation, interpretation of Shayich V'Emunah. It's Alter Rebbe truly brings us into the spirit of Achdus Hashem. We mentioned this time again in the previous classes. So, the very last chapter, Perikut Beis, we did mention in this past class, and namely in the one before this past, of what you Perikut Beis, this 12th and final chapter of Shayich V'Emunah, is all about. What does Alter Rebbe add over here? Or we did mention that it is indeed distinct than the previous chapters, even though it follows. You can clearly see the sequence. But what Alter Rebbe becomes takes the message and makes it takes the entire chapter, and even the message we kind of figured it out, but he brings us into a kind of a world of detail and articulation. And in the end of the day, that this is really the message of the Alter Rebbe, that it's in all the details which we encounter, everything which comes up in front of us, in every single experience in Elam Hazeh. In the end of the day, it's all a manifestation of Hashem Echad. We did take the time, really, in the class before this class. In other words, the class two classes ago, if you will, and then in the last class we really started Perikut Beis. We did mention a few of those points that of the introduction. So again, we spent a lot of time in the class before the last class as an introduction to Perikut Beis, what it's all about. We did begin Perikut Beis last week, so we're going to right away go into it, where we're holding. I would back up a little bit, because we went from the Pnim, which means from the Tanya itself, from the Perik itself, into the Hagah, and we stopped in the middle of the Machin Shebei Eitzis Sheleg, right before Machin Shebei Eitzis Sheleg. We went into the Hagah, so we're going to start again from Derech Mashal B'Tevis Sheb'Mayim Hiraki. We'll explain in a moment. So for the newcomers, it's wherever you're watching it, but it's good to see it on the original website, tanyaonline.com, tanyaonline, one word.com, and just the advantage that it comes up with the text and a separate scroll bar. All the previous classes on Shayich V'Emunah, for that matter, we merited to conclude the entire Likutei Amarim, and you have all those classes also lined up on the left side of the site, and you open it up, and it opens up in the same fashion with the separate scroll bar, or the text and a separate scroll bar, as such easy to follow. So we're going to start from Kigoyin Derech Mashal. So that's in the original text, 178. following on the corresponding English text. That's towards the beginning of this 12th chapter. Towards the beginning, it would say about a quarter into the chapter, give or take. Kigoin derech mashal, and in the original text, page 178. Kigoin derech mashal b'teves shebemaymer hiyerakia. As an example, in the words of the saying, Yehirakia, shall there be a firmament, shenivru bahen zayin rikim, all the 7 firmaments, 7 heavens known, were created, v'chol tzva hashamayim, and all the heavenly army, asher bahem, which exists in these shiva rikim, in these 7 heavens. So we did mention in this very previous class, Yehirakia is one of the Asara Mamarish, shall there be a firmament, but we know there's the Zayin Rakim. We mentioned the Gemara, which the Gemara says Hashem Echad, which we proclaim every single day, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Echad has the message of Aleph, Ches Dalet, that there's the Ches, which is the Zayin Rakim and others. The Gemara tells us the 7 heavens and earth, and then the Dalet Ruchas Ha'olam, the 4 corners of the world, the 4 sides of the world. And then there's the Aleph, which is Hashem, Alufei Shalolam, dominates, governs, is present in the Ches and Dalet, beyond present. Hashem created and constantly creates, as such, the sole energy of this Ches, which is the 7 heavens of the earth and the 4 corners of the world. In the end of the day, Ein Eid Milvad, there's nothing else other than Hashem. So when we know of the Zayin Rikim, the 7 heavens, and in each, and this is all based on the Yehirakia. When Hashem said Yehirakia, all 7 heavens were created. And v'chol tzva hashamayim, all the heavenly army which exists within the 7 heavens. For example, say heavenly army, the Shemesh, the Areach, known to the sun, the moon. This is the heavenly army, literally translated. But they are the heavenly creations. Creations are up in Rakia, in heaven, if you will. Meaning to say, in other words, in they're on high. There's the tzva ha'oretz and the tzva shamayim. The army of land is also an expression, which is everything we see in front of us on land. And then there's the tzva shamayim, the heavenly tzava, shemesh, yerech, sun, moon, and all the on everything which is on high is all part of the tzva hashamayim. So when Hashem said Yehirakia, all the 7 Rikim, all the 7 heavens were created. Kimayim and Azal, like Chazal tell us, that not only, and he says, Chol tzva shamayim shebahem, not only the firmaments were created, but all the tzva shamayim, this heavenly army, which exist within these 7 rakim, within these 7 firmaments, 7 heavens, if you will. Kimayim razal, Chazal tell us, shchokim sheberechaim aimdes v'teicher jesman lo tzadikim, grinders, which there are. Shchokim is one of the 7 heavens is called Shchokim, One of the 7 heavens is called Shchokim, and in this Shchokim there's Rechaim, which is grinders. They stand and they grind mana for tzaddikim, for the righteous. Okay? That's really why it's called Shchokim. Shchokim has the connotation of grinders. So in this, one of the heavens, there are grinders and grind mana to tzaddikim. Now, what this exactly means, we did explain in this very last class. It's good to go back to understand B'chlal in general, where the Alter Rebbe is coming from over here. We did explain this in detail. We're going to try not to repeat. We're going to really try Alter Rebbe is saying that every word in the exact setup of the word, the way it's pronounced and the way it's set up as a full word, that is which creates, vivifies, and gives the energy to every creation. And the words and the setup and the configuration of the words is with maximum precision. Let's try not to repeat. Really, it's a click away to the previous class. 1 click away, and then the introduction to this chapter in the class before that. And then every letter which is the beginning of a word it reigns supreme, if you will, even in the setup of the way the word is the setup of the word, that is, And the Alter Rebbe says there's a koyach. If you remember, the Alter Rebbe writes that there's a koyach which combines all the letters together, because in essence, if you think about it, the Hashem created the world and everything which is in this world and all olamis with the chav beis esis hatayra, with the 22 letters of the aleph beis. So it means every letter in essence carries, atomic energy, if you will. It created everything. Hashem only used those 22 letters, but then these 22 letters, Hashem uses them as energy to create, and the differences within creation is based on the configuration of the words. We explained this again last week. Let's really try just to move on. Just saying this briefly, maybe even cryptically, because it's a click away to see the detail, the beginning of Perek Beis, and we really took time to explain. The koyach to bring these letters together is a koyach which is oilal kolon. So besides the fact that Alter Rebbe, I believe, will say today even about the first letter of the word, which is the leader, so to say, the leader which starts, so to say, this the process of these very letters to give energy to this type of creation. But there's, namely, the message last week, the last class we learned that it's a koyach which is able to combine these letters, which takes a lot, because you're talking about each letter with that much energy, each letter with molecular atomic energy, and bringing them all together. That's a koyach which is Lashon of Alter Rebbe, it oila al kolona. It's even greater and higher than all the energies which exist in the letters itself. And that's what Alter Rebbe is saying. And from there, the Alter Rebbe says kigain derech mashal, like as an example, he says yehi rakia. So he says there's the details within every single one of the rakim, within each the seven rakim, the seven firmaments. Again, if you watch if you see the last week's class, you see how it enters kigain derech mashal, the clear continuation of derech mashal to what the Alter Rebbe said before. Again, the energy which exists with all the letters, that koyach which brings them together. You can see in detail how it flows from the previous message. So Alter Rebbe goes on and says that these Zayin and Akim are divided. And again, even though Yehi Rakia seems to connote that it's one Rakia, the firmament, but the one firmament, but no, there's 7 Rakim, and in each one of them there are many, many details. So he starts with the Shchokim, one of the Rakim, one of the heavens. These firmaments are called Shchokim for that reason, like we mentioned before, that there's grinders which grind the mana for tzaddikim. So you see tzva hashamayim, not only the Rakim itself, but you see the army, meaning to say there's so many details within every one of these firmaments. And in this case, what does it mean? The Shabbat Chaim is the Techanis Man Tzaddikim. We also explain that Hashem makes, it's his famous pasuk. Hashem says, the pasuk says, "Eini Hashem al Yireh." Hashem's eyes are those who fear Him. Despite that many of the righteous and experience difficult experiences in Elam Hazeh, but to them it's a whole different ball game. It says it was interesting. It says as an example, Rab Shimon Bar Yochai, it says that the Churban did not affect or impact Rab Shimon Bar Yochai. Just as a quick example, to try to reconcile between what does it mean? Yeah, the grinders are grinding mana to tzaddikim. You think about mana, you think about the Yidden in the Yam Yisrael in the desert, the Jewish nation in the desert, that everything was so prepared for them on a daily basis. They didn't have to exude any effort to bring their bread to the table. They didn't have to work, they didn't have to toil, and everything was ready for them. They just came out, and it was all there for them, and this was on a daily basis for 40 years. With that ease, is that the situation that exists by tzaddikim, that the righteous have everything prepared for them, laid out for them, just like the manna, the way it was in the desert, that they didn't really make an effort, no toil, and everything was just dandy? For tzaddikim, sometimes we don't see it exactly like that. Tzaddikim struggle, and sometimes precisely the righteous for the way it is explained in a number of places, and much of it is beyond explanation, but we do see that many of the righteous struggle. How do you reconcile? So the point is that whatever they need, they have a direct line. That's the point. Hashem provides for them one way or another in a way that is distinct, and any other person has to bring bread on their table. I mentioned this of Shimon Bar Yochai. It says the Churban didn't impact of Shimon Bar Yochai, it says. And the question really begs, this is the individual which had to hide from the Romans for 13 years in a cave. He wasn't impacted by Churban, by destruction. Answer, for a tzaddik, it is all matters of Elam Hazeh, truly makes no difference. It's truly insignificant. A tzaddik lives in a higher plane. He doesn't have only Ein Hashem. Hashem doesn't only provide him. It's Ein Hashem Yireov, that intimate connection which the Yid has with HaKadosh Baruch Hu by the tzaddik. It's constant, it's default, it's on an ongoing basis, and that Ein, in other words, it's not only the actual Hashem actually provides for him, it's that inner connection, and he sees which is provided for him is nothing less than perfect. Rav Shimon Bar Yochai sitting in the cave, to him, it was an experience that he didn't feel churban, despite sitting in a cave, running away, escaping from Romans for 13 consecutive years, because he lived in a higher plane. He felt that connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and even he felt that there was a clear miracle for 13 years. Just imagine, you're talking about Ein Hashem Yirev, the providence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to those who fear him. You're talking about a tree of carobs grew by the cave, and a stream of water suddenly started flowing because of Shimon Bar Yochai needed to sustain himself. Out of nowhere this came. That's a miraculous conduct. That's the aim. In other words, that personal and personable, if you will. I am HaKadosh Baruch Hu to those who fear him. And he saw the miracle, he saw Hashem's presence, he was on a high. For that matter, the Gemara tells us that the real insights of Torah Shimon Bar Yochai gained, or the depth of Torah, even Nigla Torah, the revealed part of Torah, was precisely because of the tzad of the Maida. In other words, the difference, the discomfort, one way or another, of the Maida of the cave, sitting in the cave for 13 years. The Gemara brings out for the different dialogues that he had with Pinchas ben Yair, which was his father-in-law, and he the famous 12 questions, 24 answers, and so on and so forth, which means Reb Shimon Bar Yochai was lived on a different level. It was a spiritual oasis for him, one way or another, the cave. So, it's churban for the average person. Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, it's not. And to the contrary, he sees a miracle, sprouting out of nowhere just because Hashem is with him and needs to provide him his sustenance for the 13 years, and he doesn't need more than carobs. Reb Shimon Bar Yochai doesn't need a good sandwich. His delights, his pleasures, his delicacies, his different types of pleasures, delights, and delicacies of the average human being. For real, not just it's meant to be so, and I don't need to have connection and trying to put myself in a higher plane. No, he's for real, doesn't need all that. It makes no difference to him. It's totally insignificant for him. The delights and pleasures of Elam Hazeh, he just needs to be connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Bechad k'tiras katarna, the famous expression, knotted in, tied with HaKadosh Baruch Hu on a constant basis. So when it says that Hashem provides to the tzaddikim like manna, the teichenes manna, in other words, Hashem provides for the tzaddikim like the man, and again we have the man as the image of the man, of the way it was provided for Am Yisrael in the desert, effortless, so to the tzaddikim there's a special conduit through and connection with which tzaddikim have with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So it says, where does this begin? Where is that special place that establishes this hashpah for the tzaddikim? Where is that unique place which establishes that special flow of sustenance at tzaddikim? That is in one of the rekim, which is called shchakim. Shabai, there is grinders which grind the manna for tzaddikim. Now again, we did speak of it a little, not so much in length, maybe more detail in this very previous class, but it's quite clear. And then there's another, as it goes on, another one of the heavens which is called Zvul. Zvul is translated a habitat. And remember the Rashi says about Zvulun. Why was he called Zvulun? Zvul, it says Shabai Yerushalayim Ubeis HaMikdash Umizbeach. That in Zvul, in this heaven which is called Zvul, there's Yerushalayim. Right? You think Yerushalayim is there in the Middle East, and that's where it begins. Yeah, obviously there's the Yerushalayim, and that's the Middle East, meaning saying in Eretz HaKodesh, in our holy land, that physical territory called Yerushalayim. Yeah, that's where it is physically, and there's the Beis Hamikdash. There was a time it was there physically, and it's going to come back physically, a full Beis Hamikdash, Bimheir V'Yameinu, and then there's the Mizbeach, the altar. But it doesn't commence on the physical plane. There, it has a counterpart on high. For that matter, it says that there is the Zeshara Shamayim. Remember, Rashi tells us, the Gemara tells us, Zeshara Shamayim, that in Beis Hamikdash the Lamayla is Mechuva and Kineg Beis Hamikdash Lamata. That there is a open line between the Beis Hamikdash in its physical image, and then there is the Beis Hamikdash on its spirit and its spiritual plane, and there is its counterpart on high, and there's mechuvan, means to say there's a direct opening, and as such, the Beis Hamikdash becomes a very unique place. Besides the fact that this is the place of Asheras Hashchina, but it's open to the way it's on high, which is the Beis Hamikdash Shalamayla. So it says, where is this Beis Hamikdash Shalamayla? Yeah, it's in one of these firmaments. This is the firmament. It's called Zvul. There you have the Yerushalayim, the real Yerushalayim Shel Mailo. There you have the Beis Hamikdash Shel Mailo, and then you have the Mizbeach Shel Mailo, which means all this on high. Meaning to say, obviously, we're not talking about a physical Yerushalayim, which exists placed. In other words, if you just went up to that heaven, you would see a physical Yerushalayim and a physical Beis Hamikdash built out of bricks, and you have Mizbeach, the altar. It's obviously not so. We're talking about a metaphysical reality, which is a ruchnisdik reality. But the truth of the matter is, to us, Gashmias, the tangibility of Gashmias, this is what seems to be real to us. But we understand, and we can even appreciate that it's to the opposite. The real deal is ruchnias, is spiritual, is ruchnis, which means spirituality over physicality. And that's, again, even one which is in Elam Haza and well anchored in this physical world could appreciate that Gashmis of Elam Haza is not the real deal, because everything physical, you see the notion of finitude and limitation and whatever Gashmis of Elam Haza presents with all its excitement, or we're not talking about excitement, Gashmistic excitement. We're talking about even the sensation of a physical Beis Hamikdash and a physical Yerushalayim, and this is truly the holiest places. This is truly places which are truly sacred, and the Shekhinah truly dwells there. And for that matter, from a certain perspective and point of view, the Ikir Shekhinah, famous expression, Ikir Shekhinah b'tachteinim ha'is, in the very beginning of creation, because this is the world that the Hashem established, that He is going to make this world the Mokim Shechinase, the place which He dwells. Yisava Kodesh Baruch Hu liyazdira b'tachteinim. Myriads of times we mention this in these studies. The Eibishter Hashem wanted precisely a dwelling place in this very physical world, not on a spiritual plane, not on high, but dafka b'tachteinim. As such, this world is really where Hashem truly, the core essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which that's where the nisavik comes from, that inner taiva, the inner lust and desire of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, lust, if you will, the inner desire of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is precisely to have a dir b'tachteinim in this physical world. So in this world, you have the core essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, more than it's on high, granted, but nonetheless, as HaKadosh Baruch Hu created, they say the Ishtalshlus, that from Ruchnius eventually evolves into Gashmius, and we can all appreciate that the advantage in context of sensation, right? The ultimate purpose, obviously, is in this world. Remember, the Alter Rebbe has that famous word in Perek Lamed Zayin, Lukuti Amorim, Nan Shaykh Mon Lukuti Amorim. You could find it also. Beautiful explanation. Sometimes we say Talmud Torah, it's Keneged Kulam, learning Torah overrides every single mitzvah. And then we say mitzvah shi'ef shalasei de'achir, a mitzvah that can't do it through anybody else, a mitzvah that can't be done through anyone else. You stop learning Torah and you do the mitzvah. And the question really is, if Torah in essence is meant to supersede, is meant to override every mitzvah, so what's the relevance if I can do it, that someone else can do it for me, or it could be done through others, or it cannot be done through others? Why would I stop learning Torah? If Torah by definition is a mitzvah which is so much greater than any other mitzvah, remember the Alter Rebbe reconciles this, is the sensation of learning Torah, the union with HaKadosh Baruch Hu when you learn Torah, there's nothing like it. Again, famous chapters, Hey and Chav Gimel and Lamed Zayin, all in Lukuti Amorim. But in the end, towards the end of Lamed Zayin, he says, could you compare the union of a Yid with HaKadosh Baruch Hu through learning Torah, as opposed to, in other words, vis-a-vis the connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu through mitzvahs, which is also a deep connection. It becomes like a lavush, a garment, to the Kedusha of Elokus, like the Alter Rebbe explains there in length in these chapters for that matter. But nonetheless, the Torah, the union with a Yid through Torah is far greater. The Alter Rebbe used Lashon La'en Kei, it's infinitely greater than the union with a Yid with HaKadosh Baruch Hu via doing a mitzvah. But nonetheless, the Alter Rebbe says, what did Eibushter create this whole world for? Why did he create the entire... What did he bring in? Why did he create? Why did he become a creator, invest in creation, in all creations? Elam Esaliyah, the supreme spiritual worlds, or even Atzilus, and then Bri Yitzir. Why did he do that? Answer, he wanted to get to this very point of this very physical world. Hashem wanted a dwelling place in this very physical world. And because that was his inner core desire, core essential desire, and therefore, in order to establish this dira, this dwelling place, in order to fulfill Hashem's taiva, to have a domain in this, an abode in this very physical world, you have to deal with the physical world to elevate it and to sublimate it, which is naturally manifest when you do a mitzvah over learning Torah. Because Torah doesn't deal with the very physicality of Elam Hazeh. It talks about Elam Hazeh. It deals with Elam Hazeh. It deals even with the sheker of Elam Hazeh. There's some of the nitty-gritty of Elam Hazeh in Torah. Take a learn of Blat Gemara. One of them is even lying. This is part of the sheker of Elam Hazeh. Then you even have the ideas which are more refined. It speaks about Pesach and Matzos and Sukkah, all about the Elam Hazeh Agashmi, this halacha, that halacha, but it's not dealing directly with the physicality of Elam Hazeh. As opposed to you build a sukkah, you're taking the piece of wood and you're putting it together, it becomes a mitzvah, and you go into the mitzvah and you sit it and you make a bracha, or you're touching the lulav and you're picking up the lulav and the esrog, or eating matzah. This is the physical Elam Hazeh being elevated and sublimated and connected to Elokus, which there you fulfill Hashem's taiva of dira b'tachtenim. So when it comes to the actual sensation of the Yid with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the sensation of the union of the Yid with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or the level of the union with the Yid with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, understandably, there's nothing like Torah. But when you're talking about the broader bracket, why in the beginning, and why in the world are we here, and what is the purpose of creation? And we say no, it's about elevating, it's about refining Elam Hazeh primarily through mitzvahs. If that's the Kavanah Eliyana, if that's what Hashem's primary and the main idea of why Hashem started this whole program in the first place and gave us a Torah and so on, and mitzvahs is in order to do the mitzvah, in order to establish HaKadosh Baruch Hu, again, a Damasal in this very physical world, and they're dealing with the world, the nitty-gritty of Elam Hazeh, and elevating it to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So when you're talking about the union, there is nothing with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Obviously, Torah reigns supreme, but when you're talking about the ultimate kavanah, the ultimate purpose in creation, mitzvahs reign supreme. And therefore, learning Torah, if you want to categorize the mitzvah itself, there's nothing like learning Torah. But you stop learning Torah when the mitzvah cannot be executed through others in order to actually do the actual mitzvah, because therein lies the ultimate purpose of creation. And I say this over here is because we can all appreciate, obviously, the ultimate is the Beis Hamikdash Hagashmi. That's what we're waiting for. We're waiting for Mashiach. We're waiting that all our efforts, the cumulative efforts, the last 3,300 years, should come together, and this Elam Hazeh Hagashmi should be a perfect place which would invite and allow the Beis Hamikdash and the Hashpah, and whatever comes together with the package of the Beis Hamikdash. It's all one package. It's a world which has Yerushalayim Ira Kodesh. In other words, we see overtly the Kedusha of Yerushalayim. We pilgrimage to Yerushalayim. We have a Beis Hamikdash. We bring karbonis. It says Kim mitzvah seinecha. That's when the world will be completely transformed to an abode for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And Yakiru v'yedu kol yishvei seva. Everybody, like we say in Aleinu, will be part of this whole experience. Like we say in Musaf of the Yamim Tovim, v'le'enei kol choy, v'koreb sureinu mibein hagoyim, and this is all le'enei kol choy. The world celebrates Elokus, the divine reality, which comes to fruition or comes to full expression in a Yerushalayim, in a Kodesh, in a physical Beis Hamikdash, a physical altar, and karbonis and sacrifices, like we say, and actually, so it's so elaborate in detail in this Karban Musaf of in this rather Tfilas Musaf of the Yamim Tovim, and so many other places. For that matter, we repeat these ideas on a daily basis in our prayers, because that's what it's all about. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted this very physical world to be the container, or to be the place which which Hashem dwells and connects with. This was the ultimate purpose, and as such, it lies very deep within HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the expression is nis'ave, precisely because this is where the core essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is. But together with that, similar to the idea of Limud HaTorah, we can all appreciate that the energy is in the ruchnius. The energy is really in spirituality. The excitement is in the matters the way they are in a spiritual plane, even more than the way they are in the physical plane. You know, like difference of davening and Torah mitzvahs. Davening is a experience which is metaphysical. It means to say a person completely lashon ibn halacha. He's pashtus hagashmis. Say he's pashtus hagashmis, a complete removal, and that's what tefillah is meant to be like. We spoke about it a number of times. Famous Varta the Baal Shem Tov. A person even have to theoretically would have to bench a gaimel. Conceptually, the bench a gaimel because davening is a complete transcendence of Elam Hazeh, but that's not the ultimate purpose. The ultimate purpose is we do Eisa Shalom, and we get involved through learning Torah, doing mitzvahs, and even Hanig B'Haminig Derecheres, like the Gemara says, to introduce the godly reality into the very physical Elam Hazeh. That's the ultimate purpose. So why daven if so? No, davening is allowing us to tune in to the godly reality. When we tune into the godly reality, then we have perspective, and then the next 20 hours of our day, or the other 20 hours of the day, are infused with the godly message and the divine call, and we imbue and infuse and incorporate the godly godliness in Elam Hazeh. And as such, davening itself is when we exercise a good, healthy davening, it's an enormous, pleasurable and delightful experience. We are able to it's an experience of total transcendency. It doesn't matter how long a person has the ability to daven. If it's an hour and a half, an hour, 45 minutes, whatever it is, even within the concept of davening, a few seconds, even a moment, a few seconds, a person enters into a sensational, exhilarating experience, and there's nothing like it. In other words, that a person in Elam Hazeh, even understanding the kavanah, that Eibishter wants us to bring the godly message to the tachtenim, in other words, to the outwards, to bring the godly message into his daily occupations, again starting from mitzvahs, and so on, but does it mean that he's not in tune to the fact that the real excitement is in Ruchnius? Of course not. Of course a person appreciates Ruchnius. There's an appreciation of Ruchnius over Gashmius. In the context of the Shleisha Dvarim Sha'olam Aimed, davening, learning Torah, doing a mitzvahs, the sensation of davening, every Yid, and again, not necessarily someone who's on any spiritual level, could appreciate, that's where the real Tainug is. We mentioned Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, well, he was an image of a tzaddik, constantly connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Gashmius didn't mean anything for him. He lived a spiritual life on a spiritual plane, and that's where the real tainug is. That's where the real pleasure is. And why am I saying this? Maybe a bit too long, because we say, there's the Yerushalayim Beis Hamikdash Mizbech, so what do we need it down here? And what's the point of having a Beis Hamikdash Shalamayla? Or Yerushalayim Shalamayla, Mizbech Shalamayla? What's the point? Didn't HaKadosh Baruch Hu want a Dira B'Tachteinim, the Yerushalayim over here in this world? Isn't that the main idea? Why are you talking to me about the way it's on high? The answer is because we have to know that even when we enter into the physical Yerushalayim, we ought to know that there's the counterpart of Yerushalayim on high. There's the message. Yerushalayim is not only a city, it carries even Yerushalayim, the word itself. Yerushalayim is Yerushalayim. That a person understands that Yerushalayim is about a complete fear and awe and reverence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That reflects the Yerushalayim Shalmaila. If he's bringing in a korban to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, a sacrifice, he has to schlep his physical animal, bring in a physical altar, because that's the ultimate purpose. The way we do it over here, understandably, but when a person brings a korban, he has to know that nis korban actually has the connotation of kiruv, becoming closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's an experience which is reflective of the Mizbeach Shel Maila. It's a Maila, it's a Ruchnistic type of experience. That is again the point of HaKadosh Baruch Hu establishing a Maila as opposed to the Mata. All this on a Ruchnistic plane, because Hashem doesn't want that dissonance between the Gashmis and the Ruchnis, and to know that the real delight of a Yid is in Ruchnis. But he brings out the Ruchnis, it ultimately manifests not only in a spiritual plane, but it's manifest on a physical plane. And again, similar to what we said about Torah mitzvahs, expressing itself in a physical plane, that's where the Hashem's kavanah, that's what the ultimate purpose is, even more than the way it is beruchnis. But that's not telling us that our life is not meant to be a ruchnisdik life. We daven every day, not once a year, not once a month, not once a week. Every day, because Hashem wants us to have that spiritual, blissful experience, and He wants us to have it, for that matter, 3 times a day, but namely Shachris. And what's the purpose? Because that's when, besides the fact that's when we gain perspective, as we mentioned earlier, in order to bring in the Ruchnius, to fuse spirituality with the physicality, we have to enter, and we have to have that Ruchnius, that metaphysical, spiritual, transcendent experience. That's what davening is all about. Again, in halacha, His pashtus agashmis. But besides that, Hashem wants to connect to us, or wants us to appreciate that real life is on a spiritual plane. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to take that spiritual experience and enmesh it, and fuse it with Gashmias, and imbue that experience into the physicality of Elam Haz. In any case, we got carried away a little bit with this, and it's out of context, but because many people ask, what's the point of Yerushalayim Shel Maila? What's the problem with Yerushalayim Shel Mata? What do you need Beis Hamikdash Shel Maila and Mizbeach Shel Maila? But this is the point. The point of it all is to know that when we enter Eretz Yisrael, Yerushalayim, Beis Hamikdash, bring a korban on the physical Mizbeach, we have to simultaneous with doing everything on this physical in a gashmistic manner. Means say physically, we have to come in together into that experience with the Maila within us, expressing the Maila, the way Yerushalayim, and all this, rather the way it stands on high. Yerushalayim Shel Maila, Beis Hamikdash Shel Maila, and Mizbeach Shel Maila. Then he goes on with the Machin, the next one of the 7 Rakim, which is Shabbai Eitzis Sheli Veitzis Barad. I think we're going to stop over here because we're going to explain also this. What does this mean? Storages of snow and hail. That's what literally means. Machon, which means it's a domain. The cold, rather, Machon. One of the heavens are called Machin. And in this Machin, there's treasures of snow and hail. We'll explain. It's a similar idea. Understandably not the energy of Yerushalayim Yisamish Mizbeach, but we're going to explain this as well. But namely, he doesn't go through all 7. As you see, he stops over here. But namely, he wants to go on that everything comes from all these 7 firmaments have their specific chayas, specific energy. It's not only the Yehirakia itself, even though primarily the entire structure of all 7 Rakim come from the 2 words Yehirakia, but because there's so many details within the Rakim itself, starting from the fact it's 7 Rakim, and every Rakia, every one of these firmaments have all this multiple and different types of creations and different types of, and as such, the names of every single Rakia, which expresses what's going on in each one of these firmaments, each one of these heavens, if you will. As such, we understand that there's different energies coming through the names of each one of these Rakim. Again, we're going to explain this, Bezos Hashem, which again follows the message of the beginning of the chapter, Yud Beis, this 12th chapter, and again complements and completes the overall message of the Alter Rebbe, as we'll, Bezos Hashem, look forward this coming week. Have a wonderful evening.